Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. We're going to have a really good discussion today on a critically important topic: diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's our topic for today at Global Chamber. And I couldn't think of two more learned, expert minds to cover this topic, not just from an esoteric standpoint of, it's a good thing, but much more importantly, what are the benefits? How can we implement it practically? And particularly now in this world where talent can go wherever it needs to go, how can employers use DEI for global advantage, for talent acquisition, for innovation, for competing in markets around the world? These are critically important topics today more than ever, and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is a tool that you can use to be more successful in your business. So let's dig right in. We've got our speakers today are Dr. Joelle Martin, who I've happened and had the pleasure to know for quite a number of years. Dr. Martin actually, prior to our signature events at Global Chamber, I think even prior to Global Chamber, was a speaker on women in global leadership. She's been a long-time leader, not just in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but in leadership overall for many years. In fact, 20 years experience. She's worked with hundreds of clients. She's lived a long and wonderful life. She's got many years left to help companies be more successful. And today, she's going to be focusing in on helping you understand and implement and be more successful with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So before we introduce our second speaker, Dr. Martin, I'd like to start with you. DEI is, I guess, a new acronym. When I say new, I don't know we had that acronym 10 years ago. The basic ideas, however, are largely the same. However, there have been refinements in the way we define it, the way we implement it in companies. Could you kick us off today, please, with a little bit of a summary of the benefits of DEI, and then talk a little bit about setting up the stage for how companies can implement it, have implemented, or whatever you'd like to share in terms of getting us started today. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me, Doug. Hi, Ethan. The thing about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it has been a 20+ year journey for those of us who have that lived experience and have gone through the training and development and the educational resources to be active in it. And what I invite everyone to appreciate is that with the events that happened in 2020, organizations suddenly saw that there were things that they needed to do, that they could do to make their organizations better financially in terms of service delivery, in terms of the performance improvement of their people. And they are all under the banner of diversity, which means differences, equity, which means that you are giving people what they need to be successful, as you are having a more neutral attitude towards people in general. And then inclusion. And inclusion means that you're inviting people to the party that you, as a majority person, may not have invited to your party before. So there's a lot of significant research that I invite you to go through and learn about. Number one, the financial advantages to your company for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Think of it this way. If you had everyone, if you looked at everyone in your organization, they're people, right? And if you could find a group of people that were not performing at their highest level, what does that mean to your company? It means to your company that you are not as financially equipped as you could be. It means that you're not a high-performing organization. And it means that this is not your legacy program. So what do? You find out What is your scan? What is your needs assessment? What is that telling you about who you're reaching and who is working in your organization? There are metrics for that. Metrics in every area. Customize your needs assessment. Then that may be what was, well, that was what one of my clients, two of my clients did this year. And then what you do is you go forward and you do your next year's assessment and you watch how your metrics grow. And if you've got a solid DE&I program, you will see that your metrics shift in a positive direction. Your people will be more high performers. Now, when I say DE&I, I'm not leaving anyone out. It's just that the challenge in most of our organizations is they're not dominated. They are dominated by folks we would call majority. They are not receptive often enough with the kind of work that Ivan does in recruiting people of color, having it be a equitable pay scan for each one. So there are so many reasons. And Doug, that was a very big question you asked me. I'm debating, all right, what do I most need to say? Okay, I think that's it. Like when you look at all of the diversity dimensions, and there are 4 of them, there's the difference that we have as personalities, there's the internal dimensions, that we are born with. There are external ones that we get to choose and create. And then there's the organizational ones. Then the one beyond that, because when this project was done in 1990 by 2 phenomenal women, there wasn't a global dimension, but I think we all on this call get, you know, as being here for the Global Chamber, there definitely is a global dimension that impacts all of our lives. So don't leave anybody out. When you look at your organization or when you look at the people that you're training and developing, don't leave anybody out. Particularly look for the people you haven't invited to your party before, and that's where you're losing money. Is that enough, Doug?
Really good way to kick it off. Thank you very much. I want to say a couple things next in terms of what we want to try to accomplish today. And then I'd like to invite everybody who's listening to, in the comment field, please fill in the things that we may not be talking about that are important to you, so that we can cover them, and we'll monitor those so that we can hopefully capture them here. If you're watching this as a recording, please feel free to contact the speakers at any time. If you have any trouble, can't figure out how to get a hold of them, info@globalchamber.org is always a great way for us to connect you to either of these amazing speakers. Today, we want to understand the benefits of DEI. We want to understand how to implement it successfully, and maybe some examples of where that has happened. Because at the end of the day, again, we really want to make sure that your organization and your team can reap the full benefits of this. We, even old white guys like me, who you know, are not diverse, you know, but we've all been, even me, have been in situations where we've been the outlier, the person that's different. And hopefully we've realized through that experience, I think the global tribe gets it, that diversity has value. You know, in my case, I was the only foreigner in a Japanese company, and I felt pretty weird, you know, through that experience. And I felt groupthink was definitely in place with all these Japanese folks. No bad thing against them. It's just that, you know, they didn't have any diversity. Even gender, it was almost nearly 100% male, and yet they're a very successful team, more successful by becoming more gender balanced, more successful, especially on the global stage where the world is full of all sorts of people. If your executive team and your team is diverse, just think how much better they can understand what those opportunities are around the world. So those are the things we're going to cover today, because this is a topic critically important to global companies. Because if you're hitting the world with a diverse organization and an executive board, particularly, you're going to be in trouble. And I've seen it firsthand, and I'm sure that our experts today have seen that as well. So let's avoid that, shall we? Yvonne Demosthenes is the CEO at Hamilton Demo. Yeah. And you have quite a number of years, Ivan, in this field as well. You've seen quite a bit. And I'm wondering, what would you like to add to this conversation to kick things off?
Yeah, you guys are covering everything. And Doug, let me first start off by saying you are not old at all. So that's the first thing. And Dr. Martin, thanks for the great introduction, because I think when we realize that DE&I is truly a commitment, and in this global world now, the global commerce, all we need to do is look at Fortune 500. And when you look at those companies that have committed to DE&I, they are the ones that have stayed and been successful the longest. They haven't just been here for 2 or 3 years. They've continued to grow. They've continued to thrive and flourish. So that commitment, when I see organizations who decide to do it, but they pause, they stall because they were not aware of the work that it entails, the commitment is very important. And there are lasting benefits. And to Dr. Martin's point as well, it's a great growth mechanism for those organizations that have not yet embraced diversity, DE&I. When you think about it quite practically, oftentimes those that are not focused on or looked on as a demographic for your company's revenue, once you include internal DE&I, many times, if not all the time, the additional growth accelerates for an organization as well. So I'd like to point that out to reinforce what she mentioned. Pretty much all the companies that we're talking about on the Fortune 500 love to have revenue growth. So that's always something to entice a commitment to diversity. And lastly, I'll just say I've been witness to organizations that really what they want, and when they understand that they are able to attain many different perspectives in engaging the marketplace, they truly desire that deep diversity, right? So that deep diversity that we're truly looking for, the first step is embracing and having a commitment to DE&I. So yeah, I've got lots to share. Almost going on 20 years of experience in talent acquisition and recruiting, and I've had the opportunity to be in some back rooms and help some great companies. So looking forward to sharing some of those with you.
Congratulations on that success, and so thank you. So let's really kind of now dig in, Joelle. In terms of companies that can benefit from this, and as you have conversations with teams, especially in the early stages, what are some of the things that you look for, and in terms of companies that really need this? So I would ask two things. One is, in terms of any additional follow-up you'd like to make, given both of your opening comments, please feel free to add anything else. And then as you're dealing with companies, what are some of the things that you look for in terms of companies that could really benefit from DE&I?
Okay, number one, I think every company can benefit from DE&I. There are some people who, for whatever reasons, choose not to invest in it. But I think it's one of the most significant investments an organization can make. What I look for when the companies come to me, they are not your Fortune 500 people. The Fortune 500 people have a staff, they have a DE&I leader. They're not looking for a practitioner. what I'm looking for are those organizations that are mid-sized, that are just starting out in DE&I, that have the CEO who is passionate about it. And I have been very blessed to have my clients be like that. So those are the ones that I'm looking for. Now, not to say that if a Fortune 500 company came to me and say, we'd like you to be part of our team, that I would say, oh no, I would definitely say yes. But my core clients have this first ingredient that you're talking about. And this is what I look for, Doug. I look for somebody who comes and says to me, I am passionate about it. I want our company to be stronger. I know that there's some areas that we have missed, and we want to bring you on as our working partner to have our organization be better. So that's one thing I look for. And then once I get there, and I have a review committee oftentimes that wants to know more about me. Are they spending their money wisely? And I was, I noticed this one company, most current client, when they had their review committee, they were multicultural, multi-generational, multiracial. I said, aha, I can work with them, because my transformational leadership approach can be very grueling for some, because we're looking at corporate organizational change and transformation. So that was something that I look for. And then I also want to know, how aligned are their teams? Doug, tell me when you've gotten your answer reached, because like Ivan, I can talk about this subject because I'm very passionate about it. So going back to what I'm looking for and how I support them. Number one is with the needs assessment, a culture scan, what's missing, what's working, what's not working, what could work better. Number two, do they have an employee resource group? Do they have a diversity committee? If no, I want to put those in, because those are your champions. I work really well with our champions in these organizations. Excuse me. So that would be one thing. And then we do the diversity, equity, and inclusion training and development. And that's where minds get shifted, where we create allies. And it really just depends. So that would be, for example, microaggressions. That could be, that's a big one nowadays, bias, and other trainings that have people be able to learn, develop, and shift their attitudes in a direction where all are included. And then the metrics come into the equity area. So that would be my first thing that I'm looking for, and that's
okay.
my track.
Okay. And so I'm gonna keep asking questions and build on the questions. And so Joelle, I'm gonna ask Ivan a little bit different question. And so when I come back to you, feel free to answer it if you didn't answer it the first time, because it's going to be a little twist to it. And the twist is this, Ivan. What I just heard from Joelle was that really every company can benefit from this, and she started to get into some of the actual what are you looking for, and then how do you begin the implementation. And I'd like to ask you the same thing, but the twist I'd like to add to you is, if you're based out of Ohio, and if you're working with a company that's only in Ohio and is just a very local company, that's very different from a company that's doing business around the world. And so I'm wondering, how do you assess and how do you begin the process with a company that is global versus local? Does it differ?
Yes and no. So Dr. Martin mentioned some things that were right on point, and I'll even add one of the other signals or tells are looking at a company's career site. And some of the messaging that you can tell from a company's culture is projected through that career site, the About Us career site, etc. And then another thing that is really helping with all things discussed, and especially recruiting, are resource groups or the beginnings of resource groups. So these resource groups, in addition to all the other great things and all the wonderful internal and external things that can happen, these are phenomenal opportunities for people to refer others to the company and be used as a tool and a mechanism in a talent acquisition strategy. So I'll tell you, Doug, that any company, whether local, regional, national, international, if they have those components, or they are willing to commit to those components, that can really be a strategic advantage in attaining and acquiring talent. And just to give you some examples, small to medium-sized company here that's maybe 50, 100 employees, they're competing with everybody else for the same talent. So how do you try to compete with the big mega names, the big Fortune 500 companies that are perhaps more attractive or seem more attractive or have just better brand awareness? They have more of a recruiting brand behind their names. Well, not only do you try to create a story and share your culture, but you try to attract from different ponds as well. You just don't stick in your pond. You don't stick in your backyard. You try to expand your reach. And that's a big part of diversity when recruiting, right? You want to widen the net. They used to call that casting a wider net back in the day. But truly, there are lots of opportunities to find those matches or find those people that can truly come on board immediately and impact your organization if you just spread and cast your net a little bit wider or a lot wider a lot of times.
Got it. I understand. Joelle, does that make sense to you? And is that how you would look at it?
Absolutely. In fact, when Ivan mentioned their About Us site, one of the things that I look for with my clients are, what are your optics? The optics in your website. When people come to your website and they find somebody that does not look like them, they think they are not invited. Now, the people that do the marketing for those companies may think that, oh, well, I'm showing a broad scan of people. But if the people of color, if the GLBTQ people are not included, if you're not doing your Hispanic, Latino commercials and have that on your website, here in the US, they'll think that you don't mean me. And that's because so many of these people that I've mentioned have been marginalized, not been invited. And so when they have somebody who does invite them, who does show that, oh yes, we understand, we want you here, we welcome you, they're more apt to reply. And the other thing is that, to Ivan's point, once you recruit them, your DE&I journey is not over. Not at all. Once you recruit them, you got to keep them there. You know, research tells us it costs more to train a new person than it does to retain the person that you have. And I personally want to do some work with women of color, because many of them are leaving the workplace and we need them there. So DE&I is not just about being a person of color. Like I said in the beginning, it's about everybody. You know, when everybody wins, your company is more profitable. And when the everybody includes some people who haven't been winning before, oh my goodness, guess how much more value and benefit that will be.
Yeah, Dr. Martin, I'd like to share with you too. Doug mentioned the majority. More and more, I have young people who are what we described as the majority, also seeing the optics and choosing not to express interest in companies that they view as not really being inclusive, right? They are seeking diverse workplaces to be part of. So that's been a really, truly pleasant surprise with the younger generation. I know we don't give them a lot of credit, but they're truly seeking out a more diverse workplace and experience as well.
Absolutely. Doug, we haven't talked about the changes in America, like the change in demographics, the change in generations. To Ivan's point, the younger generations truly want to make a difference. If that sounds a little like our baby boomers, well, look who's raising them. So yeah, we have a lot of different shifts in America. And I think that globalism is one of them. So, yes.
That makes a lot of sense. Yesterday, I sat in on a conversation. We have an intern in London, Global Chamber London,
Mhm.
Natya Ramasamy, and she evaluated Global Chamber and our diversity and the way we, how we treat it, and where are we, and what opportunities for improvement are there. And one of the things we were talking about through that was that in general, Global Chamber actually is pretty good. But there are some gaps and there are some holes. And one of the things that I was trying to explain, and maybe you can help me with this, is that we've had chapters that are not very diverse. And maybe I should just leave it out where, and I've tried to explain to them that it's not, right. 18 advisory board members and 4 women, 4 out of the 18, and almost no other diversity, people of color. And then another chapter that is very diverse, Asian and African American and gender balance and all of that. And I haven't known how to politically correct explain that to people. And so I guess there's 2 elements of the question. One is, how do you get people to be trained to recognize it? I look at it and say, oh my God, this is why do I need to explain this to you? However, I have to explain it to some people. So what is it that gets some people tuned in and others completely tuned out? I presume that's part of what you bring to the table, right? You get people
Yeah, I do.
more holistically understand that this is wrong, that there are things that can be done. Here's the value, of course, in it, but how do you get them there? How does an organization get there?
Well, I'm interested in hearing what Ivan says too on that question, because basically what you're talking about is making a mindset shift.
Okay.
And the diversity, equity, and inclusion that we're talking about really is an organization whose CEO has made a mindset shift and is committed to equality, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So when here's the thing, you need a critical mass of people in your organization to want this. You don't need everyone to. And one thing that I would shift in language, I would never tell anyone you're wrong, never, because that would have them go into the defense. What I would do, and most of the times people are thinking about a stereotype is why they don't want it. All Black women are, all Asians are, and so on and so forth. So I listen to their beliefs, and then I ask them to tell stories. Stories are a great way to bring people together. So for those folks, they may have a panel and then get to see that that the panelists, like with the one organization you're talking about, maybe they are charged with creating a multicultural, multi-generational panel for their members. And then once they have that panel together, ask them, tell us about yourself. What we're looking to do is to create similarities, to create connections key, create an authentic connection where people see that these are people that they're talking about. And then, I invite my clients to go to some multicultural events. I invite them to my church. Let's say, okay, let's go to church. Because what's happening is that people have built up barriers between themselves. And DE&I removes the barriers.
Got it.
It's done well, it removes the barriers.
I hadn't thought of it this way, but you mentioned and you kicked off by talking about CEO leadership. And so where that took me was that this seems like then something that if at the top of the company, that the leader of the company feels very committed toward this, that's how it pervades the organization, right? And so whether it's DE&I or customer focus, whether it's innovation, these are things that, I mean, you normally don't have to convince people that innovation is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So these are like characteristics of a good company that from the top, if it's being led, then now becomes tactics falling out of that, right? Like, okay, well, now that you believe that innovation,
Right.
customer service, and DEI is important, here are the things that you need to follow. Is that a way to look
You're
at it?
getting real close to it, Doug. I
Okay.
probably would say, what is your company committed to? Do you
Okay.
want to have financial? Do you want to have innovation? I'd ask the why. And
Okay.
then in the why are the people. And then, you know, there's statistics. I think the 86% is a statistic for the innovation of a company through people, are the innovation of a diverse company are 86% better than a non-diverse company. So there's statistics like that. And yet, truth be told, there are analytics that are very, very persuasive. So even if you don't want to invest in DE&I, give it another name, you know, say, oh, it's innovation. Oh, it's growth, customer service. Now, you know, with the demographics, customers are changing, right? You just, hello.
Yeah. Yeah. No, if you get a chance, if you haven't watched the movie or the documentary Civil War on MSNBC, it's frightening, you know, that there are people with mindsets that are 100 years old in terms of just thought processes. And we run into those people in companies, not so much with global companies, but they're still there, right? And they have to be addressed some way or another. Sometimes moving them aside is the best way, but from a leadership standpoint, it's critical that it start there. So thank you for that piece of it. Ivan, what are your thoughts of what we've chatted about?
Oh yeah, great stuff,
right,
and Doug. Yeah, great stuff, and Doug. I'd like to just share some advice too. First, with your cities that are maybe not quite reflecting the way that you would like the panels to reflect. I would tell you, don't assume that they understand or they know that there's another way to do things. Maybe chat with them and ask, hey, have you ever considered this? Or I noticed that perhaps, oh, there's this community here where, you know, they're business leaders or company owners that would be interested. So don't assume, because maybe they're really good at doing things one way and it's worked for them for so long that they're not really aware of other ways. That's all part of diversity, right? We want to do things a little bit differently than what we've historically done. And then second piece of advice, which was shared with me years ago, is that we do oftentimes encounter difficult and uncomfortable situations when discussing DE&I, and when we encounter that, one of the things that has helped me when I receive this advice is to approach and treat everyone with dignity and respect. So you would not believe, even those uncomfortable conversations, the person on the other side, they may not necessarily agree with you, but they don't feel threatened. And I can tell you, once that light bulb went off and I started making sure that I was projecting any potentially uncomfortable conversations, questions, especially in talent acquisition, right? So when you're recruiting someone, you don't want to leave a bad impression because that impacts your client. Whether they decide to move forward with the opportunity or they decide to withdraw from the opportunity, you want to leave a great impression for that client's recruitment brand. So I've found that advice has really helped me and offered opportunities for further dialogue on many other levels too. So just a piece of advice: when you're shooting from the hip, or if the situation calls for some type of tactic, if you approach with dignity and respect to each individual, oftentimes they will welcome the opportunity to debate, discuss, answer, etc. And it really lightens the uncomfortableness if that's there.
Okay, yes, so that's interesting because I think what that leads to is that I would imagine for both of you, the times that you've been working in a company on these and the implementation of this was from the top. Somebody said, this is what we're going to do, but the problems end up being people interspersed within the company that become roadblocks and barriers. And so what you're saying is treat everybody, including those roadblocks, with respect. But also you've got to get the work done, right? So I'm wondering, Joelle, given that, what approach do you take when you run into these barriers? And then I'd like to kind of transition into starting to talk about maybe some successful examples that both of you have seen where, the company wanted to make a change, they made a change, and it went well, and maybe feel free to talk about the implementation and how that went. And then ultimately, how do you measure success? What does that look like? So Joelle, why don't you go next?
Okay, so the story about success. Oh, you asked first about the roadblocks. I tell people going up, these are some of the roadblocks you may face. And here are recommendations, because I come in as a consultant, a working partner. I'm not part of their staff, obviously. So here are some of my recommendations for how you can handle those roadblocks. And there have been times when I've been called in to be an executive coach to someone, when I moderated a very tense situation, moderated it through the process. So they ended up, each person, to Evan's point, being respected. So there's different ways of handling these roadblocks. One roadblock has to do with who is on your diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. I work with committees. I set them up with and for them. I give them examples how other diversity committees have done great work. I give them everything that I can to accelerate them on their DE&I journey, which is what I love calling it, because it is a journey. It's never over. So then when I think about one of my most beloved clients, once I say I'm in, I am in as we. I had the privilege of working with an organization that was owned and operated by Baptist ministers. So there you have it. And they got a CEO, a new CEO, the first secular CEO they had ever had. And he selected my company, selected me to work with them. And one of the things that started it off was, he said, Joelle, I want you to make a home for your mother. And I mean, yes, I want to work with you. This is Homes and Services for the Aging. So we started with a big event. We did the needs assessment. We did all of the work. We had our committee in place. And I had weekly meetings with them in the beginning, just to give them certainty and confidence. It's really important. You got to be there with them. And the results turned out that the company grew. They went from a small organization to an industry leader in the Homes and Services for the Aging. Great diversity. They went into new areas, affordable housing, and so on and so forth. So it was business growth, it was innovation, it was connectedness, inclusion, and it was really, I love it when companies grow and they take advantage of this incredible service called DE&I. I see, if I may, I see a comment in here from my friend Lori. She said, optics are a great place to start. And many of us look at the webpage to see what's really important to the company. It matters. So needless to say, the company that I was working with, they had a new website. They showed the diversity of the people there. And they showed their powerful leader. He was a spokesperson for them. I went to Australia for them. And yeah, it's like equity, Doug. And you practice what you preach. And what you say you will do, you will do. Because if you don't do what you say you will do, people will not trust you. There is no inclusion and belonging in a corporate culture that has no trust and is not a safe culture. And that's some of the things that I sniff out in my needs assessment. Fortunately, another success story, they're taking that to heart and they're doing something about it. And I can't disclose what we're doing there because it's confidentiality. You know, I have a confidentiality agreement with them.
Got it. Oh, that's inspiring. Thank you. Great information and great stories. Ivan, what would you like to say in building on that?
Yeah, so Doug, to your point, we often get called when the leaders of organizations reach those barriers, hit those walls, right? So they are apprehensive to perhaps put themselves in those uncomfortable conversations. So they'll call us, and again, dignity and respect comes in where we can, as a second, third party, we can facilitate and help with that. And we make great partners in that way. So I'd also, Doug, would like to add, there's a comment from Thierry Levine. And I want everybody to know that Hamilton Demo is a certified veteran-owned business. We are a VBE through the Department of Veteran Affairs. My business partner, Sean Hamilton, is an Air Force veteran. So we're really proud of that. And we seek whenever possible to really promote our veterans with disabilities. And to her comment, it's very important. One of the first things I do when we engage in diversity recruitment is to make sure we define what that means to that organization. Because depending on the organization, it could quite frankly mean very different things. Quick example, I worked with two retailers. One was Macy's, and their definition and what they sought for diversity was quite different from a second retailer based here in Ohio as well, which was Limited Brands, who's the owner. We all know the owner of Victoria's Secrets. So at Victoria's Secrets, 92% women. At Macy's, they were looking for more cultural and racial diversity, whereas they were seeking more males to come into Limited Brands. So it's very important to know where you're going before you head out the door, right? Before you start the ignition, have an idea. I wouldn't necessarily say, pick your destination, but at least know which direction you're going, east, west, north, or south. It will help out a lot, and we can always pivot. And I also, in addition to those with disabilities, those from different races, etc., I'd also like to point out that one of the fastest growing diversity demographics in our country are those people 55 and over, right? So that all of a sudden now we've got a population and demographic that can bring some tremendous immediate impact to an organization. And sometimes they encounter some of the barriers into a company that we read about in the paper, but they can make a huge impact right away. And quite frankly, you and I both know some people that have recently changed positions and entered new companies, and they're above 60, 65 years old, and they're looking to work for another 5-10 years, right? My father, who's a physician, he'll be 81 years old on November 20th, and he gets in his car and he commutes 30-45 minutes each way every morning, Monday through Friday, and he's amazed that they let him leave the office at 5 o'clock every day. Right? He's just getting a great kick out of that. So in addition to all the other wonderful populations and demographics that we speak of, please keep in mind that population is growing at a fast rate, and there's a lot of opportunities. And some of the wins, I should say, or some of the cases that I've been able to bring witness some positive impact on. There was an insurance company that I worked with almost 10 years ago, and they were struggling to increase their revenue and have growth within the organization. And their executives identified that after some time in researching and looking within, that all their salespeople looked alike. As a matter of fact, 99% of them had the same persona, and they decided what they needed to do was reach out to different groups, different races, etc., and bring in more of a rainbow of a representation of their sales force. So within 2 years, they had Asians, African Americans, people, females, because it was an all male team. They had females, people from all walks of life, and within 2 years, they went from a flat organization to growing over 20% year over year for the next 5 years, which was huge for them. And yeah, I can't tell you who that organization was, but if you go back about 10 years and look for the insurance company that started spiking in their growth, I think you'll figure it out. And then second example that's happening right now, of all things, with a construction company that I started working with last year, and they are a $50 million small business with contracts all over the country. And after helping them define their diversity strategy and who that target, what the demographic looked like, they've had the opportunity to hire someone who actually came on this past summer. And as of today, they have over $400 million pending bids and revenue in the organization. So by the end of the year, they have the potential to more than increase their company revenue by 10 times than what they were at the beginning of the year. So those are all some successful success stories that I love to share. Just fishing in different ponds, trying to find that diamond in the rough that you've been seeking for years. And when you cast that wider net, it's all possible.
Got it. I love you reconfirm what Joelle mentioned about being a journey, which I love. And I'm wondering also on the committee idea that she talked about, that seems like a really cool idea, especially as an outsider, right? You're selecting a group of people to do, I presume, a lot of the work. And is that a normal way of approaching it? Do you do the same thing? Ivan?
Oh, so I'm sorry, Doug, can you repeat that? I apologize. I thought you were asking Dr. Martin.
Oh, so yeah, I was asking that Dr. Martin mentioned about putting together committees to be able to do a lot of the work, which seems really clever as being an outsider. Do you use a similar mechanism?
So there are opportunities where we have utilized committees. I'll tell you one of the things that we've found that really helps, especially in onboarding new recruits or trying to find and attract talent, are using focus groups within those organizations to help kind of open our eyes and identify the opportunities. So for instance, if you already have a group of people that are within the organization that you would like to have more of that demographic, we can have a focus group. And a lot of times it's better to have a company like Hamilton Demo to come in. So again, they don't feel any tension and they feel it's more of an open and welcoming environment to share their experiences. And Doug, what we found is the positive experiences, we use that in recruiting. We go out and we say, hey, there are employees in this company that have A, B, and C, and they've experienced X, Y, Z. And also, they share with us some of the difficulties they've had. So now we're able to navigate a lot better than what we would have had beforehand. So it all helps with the attraction, the onboarding. And so, yeah, I do like the committees. I do appreciate the opportunities for focus groups as well.
Fantastic. We have about 4 minutes left, so maybe a couple minutes left for each of you. And I'm wondering, maybe if we finish up with this concept of the journey and measurement of where we are in that journey, could you each make some closing comments and talk to us about how companies should be measuring, where they are in the journey and when is it over? I think, Joelle, you mentioned about it really is never over, right? Just like innovation and productivity and, other elements of companies that are successful, there's never an end point. You keep getting better and better. And so I presume that's the way it is with DE&I, but correct me if I'm wrong. But would you like to go first, Joelle?
Okay. And looking at the journey, I agree there's a beginning and there is a never-ending end to it. I liked Yvonne saying that, know what their mission is. So mission, vision, and values are key. And then, as I've been speaking and recommending, the needs assessment is a way to plot the course. And strategically, DE&I is embraced in every area of the organization. It may look like it's only an HR perspective, but it is in every area of the organization that a DE&I commitment should be made for involvement, for equitable payment, for belonging, the kind of events they have, and so on and so forth. Once you have that set up as where you are now, then you can continue to have your metrics go against that. So I'm not going to go into that again, but just look to your strategies and your metrics and look to increase them. And then you do what it takes to increase your metrics. Let's see if I answered everything. So I will just say this in my closing statement. DE&I works. Financially, it brings people together. It creates high-performing organization, high-performing people who make better decisions together. And that has to do with a board of directors. We haven't talked about them, but you have, Doug. When boards of directors are diverse, they get more work done. And again, I invite you to look up Forbes and Fortune have done some really great studies on DE&I. Check them out. And then if you have any questions, I have my email in chat. Give me a call or give me a call, my email, send me a message. And I also invited everyone to subscribe to We Get Inclusive. It's a user-friendly diversity, equity, and inclusion newsletter that comes out about twice a month. So best of luck to everyone. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Really great information. Ivan, how about you? What closing comments do you have and regarding kind of the journey, how best to measure and understand where things are?
Yeah, so to what I said previously, you don't necessarily need an X on the map. Just know which direction you're going before you start the car, right? East, west, north, or south, and we can pivot as we get there. And keep that in mind. One of the ways also is you don't have to have these etched in stone metrics to get started to measure. I would say look to your community, look to your industry, benchmark yourself as a starting point there and seek to over-index. So if your community or your industry has a representation of 5% of a demographic, now you know that now you know that you want to reach that point or further. So we all love to over-index when possible. So that's a journey that we're going through. It won't happen overnight, but get started, and it's an ongoing process. The person on the chat, Pauline Dawkins, mentioned something that I would say that keep in mind when you have some new recruits, some of the things that happen in this journey is you realize that there's some internal mechanisms that can benefit you when you're developing your DE&I strategy. So I mentioned resource groups, which are great, and they can take a lot of different forms. So keep that is a tool that you can use. You can share that through your onboarding as well as the opportunity to be part of these groups and really experience maybe some things that you may not have experienced within these resource groups in your companies. And also what's great too is I have witnessed many organizations create development programs, mentoring and coaching programs because of their DE&I strategies as well. That help the entire organization. So those are some things that that can help with new recruits coming into an organization that I'm really excited about the opportunities. And lastly, to Dr. Martin's point, those companies that do start and they begin the journey, they are going to be much better off and have much more success than those that sit stalled and spin their wheels waiting to do something in later years. So I definitely advise and hope everybody can think about these things, get these conversations moving within their companies so they can experience the great things that DE&I has brought to other organizations.
Great closing comments. Thank you so much to both of you. Ivan Demosthenes and Dr. Joel Martin, two experts that you should reach out to. Make sure that you're connected in LinkedIn, connect to them that way, and then reach out and get some information about where things stand in your journey so that you can make more progress. We are going to close the meeting now. We have another meeting in the spirit of diversity. We're visiting India in about 2 minutes in terms of different parts of India. And we've got a journey to explore parts that are not normally seen. And so we have a member in Mumbai, a Mona contractor, who's going to take us there through the Global Chamber Miami. So thank you, Lanier, for your leadership there. And for all of you, this is a journey for Global Chamber and you as well. And so this is not the last conversation we have on this. This is an ongoing conversation. So watch in 2022 for more conversations on this topic because it's so critically important for all of us to succeed. Thank you to experts. You're amazing. Thank you for taking the time as well. Thanks everybody for joining. Have a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody.
My pleasure, Doug. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.